Part 2. You will hear the managing director of a company called Stevenson's welcoming a group of work experience students. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Good morning everyone and welcome to Stevenson's, one of the country's major manufacturers of metal goods. Thank you for choosing us for your 2 weeks of work experience. My name is Julia Simmons and since the beginning of this year I've been the managing director. Stevenson's is quite an old company. Like me, the founder, Ronald Stevenson, went into the steel industry when he left school. That was in 1923. He set up this company when he finished his apprenticeship in 1926, although he actually started making plans 2 years earlier in 1924. He was a very determined young man. Stevenson's long-term plan was to manufacture components for the machine tools industry, although in fact that never came about, and for the automotive industry, that is cars and lorries. However, there was a delay of 5 years before that happened, because shortly before the company went into production, Stevenson was given the opportunity to make goods for hospitals and other players in the healthcare industry. So that's what we did for the first 5 years. Over the years, we've expanded the premises considerably. We were lucky that the site is big enough, so moving to a new location has never been necessary. However, the layout is far from ideal for modern machinery and production methods, so we intend to carry out major refurbishment of this site over the next 5 years. I'd better give you some idea of what you'll be doing during your 2 weeks with us, so you know what to expect. Most mornings you'll have a presentation from one of the managers to learn about their department, starting this morning with research and development. And you'll all spend some time in each department, observing what's going on and talking to people, as long as you don't stop them from doing their work altogether. In the past, a teacher from your school has come in at the end of each week to find out how the group were getting on, but your school isn't able to arrange that this year.
Part 3. You will hear 2 students called Jess and Tom discussing their art projects. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
How are you getting on with your art project, Tom?
Okay. They gave us the theme of birds to base our project on, and I'm not really all that interested in wildlife, but I'm starting to get into it. I've pretty well finished the introductory stage.
So have I. When they gave us all those handouts with details of books and websites to look at, I was really put off. But the more I read, the more interested I got.
Me too. I found I could research so many different aspects of birds in art. Colour, movement, texture. So I was looking forward to the bird park visit.
What a letdown. It poured with rain and we hardly saw a single bird. Much less use than the trip to the Natural History Museum.
Yeah. I liked all the stuff about evolution there. The workshop sessions with Dr. Fletcher were good too, especially the brainstorming sessions.
I missed those because I was ill. I wish we could have seen the projects last year's students did.
I suppose they want us to do our own thing, not copy.
Have you drafted your proposal yet?
Yes, but I haven't handed it in. I need to amend some parts. I've realised the notes from my research are almost all just descriptions. I haven't actually evaluated anything, so I'll have to fix that.
Oh, I didn't know we had to do that. I'll have to look at that too. Did you do a timeline for the project?
Yes, and a mind map.
Yeah, so did I. I quite enjoyed that. But it was hard having to explain the basis for my decisions in my action plan.
What?
You know, give a rationale.
I didn't realise we had to do that. OK, I can add it now. And I've done the video diary presentation and worked out what I want my outcome to be in the project.
Someone told me it's best not to be too precise about your actual outcome at this stage, so you have more scope to explore your ideas later on. So I'm going to go back to my proposal to make it a bit more vague.
Really? OK, I'll change that too then.
Part 2. You will hear a head teacher talking to parents of pupils about changes at the school. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Good morning, and thank you for coming here today. I'd like to bring you up to date with changes in the school that will affect your children. As you know, the school buildings date from various times, some from the 1970s, some from the last 5 years, and of course Dartfield House is over a century old. It was commissioned by a businessman, Neville Richards, and intended as his family home, but he died before it was completed. His heir chose to sell it to the local council, who turned it into offices. A later plan to convert it into a tourist information centre didn't come about through lack of money, and instead it formed the nucleus of this school when it opened 40 years ago. The school has grown as the local population has increased, and I can now give you some news about the lower school site, which is separated from the main site by a road. Planning permission has been granted for development of both sites. The lower school will move to new buildings that will be constructed on the main site. Developers will construct houses on the existing lower school site. Work on the new school buildings should start within the next few months. A more imminent change concerns the catering facilities and the canteen. The canteen is always very busy throughout the lunch period. In fact, it's often full to capacity because a lot of our pupils like the food that's on offer there. But there's only one serving point, so most pupils have to wait a considerable time to be served. This is obviously unsatisfactory, as they may have hardly finished their lunch before afternoon lessons start. So, we've had a new food hall built, and this will come into use next week. It'll have several serving areas, and I'll give you more details about those in a minute. But one thing we ask you to do to help in the smooth running of the food hall is to discuss with your children each morning which type of food they want to eat that day, so they can go straight to the relevant serving point. There won't be any junk food. Everything on offer will be healthy. And there's no change to the current system of paying for lunches by topping up your child's electronic payment card online. You may be wondering what will happen to the old canteen. We'll still have tables and chairs in there, and pupils can eat food from the food hall or lunch they've brought from home. Eventually, we may use part of the canteen for storage, but first, we'll see how many pupils go in there at lunchtime.
Part 3. You will hear two psychology students called Luke and Susie discussing their assignment on sleep and dreams. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
So, Luke, for our next psychology assignment, we have to do something on sleep and dreams.
Right. I've just read an article suggesting why we tend to forget most of our dreams soon after we wake up. I mean, most of my dreams aren't that interesting anyway. But what it said was that if we remembered everything, we might get mixed up about what actually happened and what we dreamed. So it's a sort of protection. I hadn't heard that idea before. I'd always assumed that it was just that we didn't have room in our memories for all that stuff.
Me too. What do you think about the idea that our dreams may predict the future?
It's a belief that you get all over the world.
Yeah, lots of people have a story of it happening to them. But the explanation I've read is that for each dream that comes true, we have thousands that don't, but we don't notice those. We don't even remember them. We just remember the ones where something in the real world, like a view or an action, happens to trigger a dream memory.
Right. So it's just a coincidence, really. Something else I read about is what they call segmented sleeping. That's a theory that hundreds of years ago, people used to get up in the middle of the night and have a chat or something to eat, then go back to bed. So I tried it myself.
Why?
Well, it's meant to make you more creative. I don't know why, but I gave it up after a week. It just didn't fit in with my lifestyle.
But most preschool children have a short sleep in the day, don't they? There was an experiment some students did here last term to see at what age kids should stop having naps, but they didn't really find an answer. They spent a lot of time working out the most appropriate methodology, but the results didn't seem to show any obvious patterns.
Right. Anyway, let's think about our assignment. Last time I had problems with the final stage, where we had to describe and justify how successful we thought we'd been. I struggled a bit with the action plan too.
I was okay with the planning, but I got marked down for the self-assessment as well. And I had big problems with the statistical stuff. That's where I really lost marks.
Right.
Part 2. You will hear a recruitment officer called Megan Baker giving a talk at a jobs fair about opportunities for those interested in the food and agriculture sectors. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Hello everyone. My name's Megan Baker and I'm a recruitment consultant at AVT Recruitment Specialists. Now, our company specialises in positions that involve working in the agriculture and horticulture sectors. So that's fresh food production, garden and park maintenance and so on. And these sectors do provide some very special career opportunities. For a start, they often offer opportunities for those who don't want to be stuck with a 40-hour week, but need to juggle work with other responsibilities, such as childcare. And this is very important for many of our recruits. Some people like working in a rural setting, surrounded by plants and trees instead of buildings, although we can't guarantee that. But there are certainly health benefits, especially in jobs where you're not sitting all day looking at a screen, a big plus for many people. Salaries can sometimes be good too, although there's a lot of variety here. And you may have the opportunity in some types of jobs for travel overseas, although that obviously depends on the job, and not everyone is keen to do it. Of course, working outdoors does have its challenges. It's fine in summer, but can be extremely unpleasant when it's cold and windy. You may need to be pretty fit for some jobs, though with modern technology, that's not as important as it once was. And standards of health and safety are much higher now than they used to be, so there are fewer work-related accidents. But if you like a lively city environment surrounded by lots of people, these jobs are probably not for you. They're often in pretty remote areas. And some people worry about finding a suitable place to live, but in our experience, this usually turns out fine.
Part 3. You will hear two food science students called Adam and Rosie starting to plan their presentation on diet and obesity. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
OK, Rosie, shall we try to get some ideas together for our presentation on diet and obesity?
Sure.
I can talk about the experiment I did to see if people can tell the difference between real sugar and artificial sweeteners.
Where you gave people drinks with either sugar or artificial sweeteners, and they had to say which they thought it was?
Yeah, it took me ages to decide exactly how I'd organise it, especially how I could make sure that people didn't know which drink I was giving them. It was hard to keep track of it all, especially as I had so many people doing it. I had to make sure I kept a proper record of what each person had had.
So, could most people tell the difference?
Yeah, I hadn't thought that they would be able to, but most people could.
Then there's that experiment I did, measuring the fat content of nuts, to see if the nutritional information given on the packet was accurate.
The one where you ground up the nuts and mixed them with a chemical to absorb the fat?
Yes. My results were a bit problematic. The fat content for that type of nut seemed much lower than it said on the package. But I reckon the package information was right. I think I should probably have ground up the nuts more than I did. It's possible that the scales for weighing the fat weren't accurate enough too. I'd really like to try the experiment again sometime.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
So, what can we say about helping people to lose weight? There's a lot we could say about what restaurants could do to reduce obesity. I read that the items at the start of a menu and the items at the end of a menu are much more likely to be chosen than the items in the middle. So, if you put the low-calorie items at the beginning and end of the menu, people will probably go for the food with fewer calories without even realising what they're doing.
I think food manufacturers could do more to encourage healthy eating.
How?
Well, when manufacturers put calorie counts of a food on the label, they're sometimes really confusing, and I suspect they do it on purpose, because food that's high in calories tastes better, and so they'll sell more.
Yeah, so if you look at the amount of calories in a pizza, they'll give you the calories per quarter pizza, and you think, oh, that's not too bad. But who's going to eat a quarter pizza?
Exactly.
I suppose another approach to this problem is to get people to exercise more.
Right. In England, the current guidelines offer at least 30 minutes of brisk walking 5 days a week. Now, when you ask them, about 40% of men and 30% of women say they do this. But when you objectively measure the amount of walking they do with motion sensors, you find that only 6% of men and 4% of women do the recommended amount of exercise.
So you can see why obesity is growing.
So how can people be encouraged to take more exercise?
Well, for example, think of the location of stairs in a train station. If people reach the stairs before they reach the escalator when they're leaving the station, they're more likely to take the stairs. And if you increase the width of the stairs, you'll get more people using them at the same time. It's an unconscious process and influenced by minor modifications in their environment.
Right. And it might not be a big change, but if it happens every day, it all adds up.
Yes, but actually, I'm not sure if we should be talking about exercise in our presentation.
Well, we've done quite a bit of reading about it.
I know, but it's going to mean we have a very wide focus, and our tutor did say that we need to focus on causes and solutions in terms of nutrition.
Oh, I suppose so. And we've got plenty of information about that. OK, well, that will be simpler.
So, what shall we do now? We've still got half an hour before our next lecture.
Let's think about what we're going to include and what will go where. Then we can decide what slides we need.
OK, fine.
Part 2. You will hear a town councillor reporting on the local transport network and a recreation facility. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Right, next on the agenda we have traffic and highways. Councillor Thornton.
Thank you. Well, we now have the results of the survey carried out last month about traffic and road transport in the town. People were generally satisfied with the state of the roads. There were 1 or 2 complaints about potholes, which will be addressed, but a significant number of people complained about the increasing number of heavy vehicles using our local roads to avoid traffic elsewhere. We'd expected more complaints by commuters about the reduction in the train service, but it doesn't seem to have affected people too much. The cycle path that runs alongside the river is very well used by both cyclists and pedestrians since the surface was improved last year, but overtaking can be a problem, so we're going to add a bit on the side to make it wider. At some stage, we'd like to extend the path so that it goes all the way through the town, but that won't be happening in the immediate future. The plans to have a pedestrian crossing next to the post office have unfortunately had to be put on hold for the time being. We'd budgeted for this to be done this financial year, but then there were rumours that the post office was going to move, which would have meant there wasn't really a need for a crossing. Now they've confirmed that they're staying where they are, but the Highways Department have told us that it would be dangerous to have a pedestrian crossing where we'd originally planned it, as there's a bend in the road there, so that'll need some more thought. On Station Road, near the station and level crossing, drivers can face quite long waits if the level crossing's closed, and we've now got signs up requesting them not to leave their engines running at that time. This means pedestrians waiting on the pavement to cross the railway line don't have to breathe in car fumes. We've had some problems with cyclists leaving their bikes chained to the railings outside the ticket office, but the station has agreed to provide bike racks there.
Part 3. You will hear 2 urban planning students discussing bike-sharing schemes in different cities. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Now that we've done all the research into bike-sharing schemes in cities around the world, we need to think about how we're going to organise our report.
Right. I think we should start by talking about the benefits. I mean, it's great that so many cities have introduced these schemes where anyone can pick up a bike from dozens of different locations and hire it for a few hours. It makes riding a bike very convenient for people.
Yes, but the costs can add up, and that puts people on low incomes off in some places.
I suppose so. But if it means more people in general are cycling rather than driving, then because they're increasing the amount of physical activity they do, it's good for their health.
OK, but isn't that of less importance? I mean, doesn't the impact of reduced emissions on air pollution have a more significant effect on people's health?
Certainly in some cities, bike sharing has made a big contribution to that, and also helped to cut the number of cars on the road significantly.
Which is the main point.
Exactly. But I'd say it's had less of an impact on noise pollution because there are still loads of buses and lorries around.
Right.
Shall we quickly discuss the recommendations we're going to make?
In order to ensure bike-sharing schemes are successful?
Yes.
OK. Well, while I think it's nice to have really state-of-the-art bikes with things like GPS, I wouldn't say they're absolutely necessary.
But some technical things are really important, like a fully functional app, so people can make payments and book bikes easily. Places which haven't invested in that have really struggled.
Good point. Some people say there shouldn't be competing companies offering separate bike-sharing schemes, but in some really big cities, competition's beneficial. And anyway, one company might not be able to manage the whole thing.
Right. Deciding how much to invest is a big question. Cities which have opened loads of new bike lanes at the same time as introducing bike-sharing schemes have generally been more successful. But there are examples of successful schemes where this hasn't happened. What does matter, though, is having a big publicity campaign.
Definitely. If people don't know how to use the scheme or don't understand its benefits, they won't use it. People need a lot of persuasion to stop using their cars.